I'm Marissa James, and this was supposed to be a perfect day. My son turned 4, and all he wanted was a hug from his grandma. What he got instead was silence. What I got was something even colder, a truth that shattered the last illusions I had about my family. And what I did after? Well, let's just say they never saw it coming. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know where my story is reaching hearts today. It was late afternoon in Denver. The kind of golden, crisp October light that makes everything feel hopeful, or like it should be. I had the whole living room glowing with flickering candles and little jungle animal party hats. I made Eli's favorite banana cupcakes with extra sprinkles, because he says sprinkles make everything better. He was wearing his paper crown, the one he made in daycare with glitter and glue, waiting eagerly by the door. He'd been asking since breakfast, "When's Grandma coming? Is Papa bringing balloons?" I smiled and told him, "Any minute now," though I stopped believing that around lunchtime. I checked my phone again, no texts, no missed calls, just me, Eli, and the cupcakes. At 4:47 p.m., I finally cracked. I stepped into the hallway, took a breath, and called my mom. The phone barely rang twice. "Marissa," she answered, no warmth, no apology. "Hi, Mom," I tried to keep my voice soft. "Where are you guys? Eli's been asking for you since this morning." A moment of silence. Then a different voice came on, my father. "We're not coming. And frankly, Marissa, stop making drama. We're tired of you always needing something." It was like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but there was nothing to say that wouldn't make me sound like I was begging, so I hung up. The silence afterward was louder than anything. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, trying not to cry. I glanced at the cupcakes again, 12 perfect little promises of celebration now gone stale. Eli wandered in, tugged on my sleeve. "Did Grandma get lost?" he asked. I dropped to my knees and pulled him close. "No, baby," I whispered into his hair. "She just forgot." He hugged me tight, and I held on like he was the only thing keeping me upright. Because in that moment he was. I kissed his cheek and looked him in the eyes. "You deserve more than this," I said. More than being stood up. More than crumbs of affection. More than a mom who has to explain away everyone else's cruelty. The party ended quietly, just me and him. We blew out candles alone. I sang happy birthday with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. And he clapped and laughed like the whole world was right there in our tiny living room. I wish that had been the end of it, but it was only the beginning. A week passed. 7 long, silent days. Not a word from anyone, not my mom, not my dad, and definitely not my brother, Jordan. Not even one of those lazy heart reactions in the family group chat. Just an empty bubble of nothingness where guilt or apology should have lived. I tried to move on. I kept telling myself, "It's fine, Marissa. Just let it go. Don't give them more space in your head than they ever made for you." But the lie wore thin. It wasn't fine. It wasn't normal. And I wasn't okay. I kept glancing at my phone like a fool, hoping that someone, anyone, would say something. Even "sorry we forgot" would have been better than pretending Eli's birthday never happened. On the outside, I was still functioning. I packed his lunch. I sang bedtime songs. I answered emails for work, but inside I was unraveling. Every task felt like pushing through syrup, thick, sticky, and slow. Friday morning, just after I dropped Eli at preschool, I came home to a mess of dishes I'd left from the night before. The coffee machine groaned like it didn't want to cooperate, and my phone lit up on the counter. A message from Mom. For a second, my heart fluttered with that stupid, conditioned hope. Maybe she'd finally felt something. Maybe she realized how much it hurt. But instead, it was this: "Send your brother $2,500 for his rest." No greeting. No explanation. Just a sentence that rang louder than any insult she could have thrown. His rest. Was this a joke? I reread it 3 times, thinking maybe it was a typo, that maybe rest meant something else. But knowing my mother, no, she meant exactly what she typed. Jordan probably wanted a break from working 2 whole weeks in a row, poor baby. I sat down hard at the kitchen table. My mind blanked for a moment. Then the rage kicked in. The hot, buzzing kind that starts in your chest and spreads to your fingertips like static. I scrolled to my bank app, barely thinking. My thumb hovered over the send money button. And then I entered $3, no typo. That was exactly what I sent. In the memo line I typed, "Let him rest on the couch." Petty, absolutely. Necessary, more than I can explain. I pressed send and stared at the screen like I just dropped a bomb, because I had, not on them. On the part of me that still wanted their approval. The girl who thought love was something you could earn if you were patient enough, quiet enough, grateful enough. That girl, she didn't live here anymore. My phone stayed silent. No reply from Mom. No, what is this? From Jordan. Just that same echoing silence, now loaded with insult on top of abandonment. I stood up, walked to the sink, and started scrubbing the dishes, hard. Every clink of the plates against the porcelain felt like punctuation. When Eli was sick and I needed someone. Clink. When I couldn't afford daycare and begged for help. Clink. When they said family always shows up, but never for me. Clink. Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I was so tired of crying over people who treated me like a burden unless they needed something from me. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "That's all he ever gave me when I needed help." And it wasn't just Jordan. That statement. It echoed across every ignored voicemail, every ghosted holiday, every eye roll when I brought up Eli in conversation. I'd built my life trying to keep connections alive that only survived on my effort. And I was done. Not in the dramatic way. Not with some angry text or one of those, "I'm blocking you for good" declarations. No, I was done in the quiet, steady, irreversible way that happens when your heart finally accepts what your brain has known all along. They're not going to change. Later that night, after I tucked Eli in and double-checked the lock on the front door, I sat alone at the table. The phone buzzed once, spam. No one followed up on the $3. Not Mom, not Jordan, not even a "was this a mistake?" And somehow that was the clearest answer I'd ever received. The next morning, I barely finished my coffee before deciding. I was done waiting for apologies that weren't coming. It wasn't about the $2,500 anymore. It wasn't even about the birthday party. It was about something much older, something rotting beneath years of "we're family," and "just help your brother this one time." A truth I'd swallowed too many times just to keep the peace. They never saw me as more than a spare part. And if they weren't going to come to me, then I was going to them. I loaded Eli into his car seat, packed a juice box and some goldfish crackers, and drove the familiar route to my parents' house. The same driveway I used to rollerblade on as a kid. Same chipped garden gnome near the porch. Same old wind chimes that clinked with every gust, except now they sounded more like alarms than memories. Eli held my hand as we walked up the steps. His little fingers clutched tighter when I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, already scowling. "Well," she said flatly, "I guess you're here to make more drama." Behind her, I saw Dad at the kitchen counter, arms crossed like a judge waiting for me to present my defense. I took a breath. Not angry, not trembling, just resolved. "No," I said. "I'm here to tell the truth." Mom stepped aside reluctantly and we entered. The room felt colder than it should have been, not in temperature, just in tone. Eli stayed quiet, his hand still wrapped around mine, his wide eyes taking everything in. "You know," I began, turning to face them, "I've been thinking about what you said on Eli's birthday, about me always needing something." Dad sighed. "Marissa, you're starting again." "No," I cut him off, steady but calm. "You all ignored his birthday, not one call, not one text, nothing. And then a week later I get a message demanding money for Jordan." Mom's face pinched like she just tasted something bitter. "He's your brother, he's going through a rough time." "He's always going through a rough time," I snapped, my voice rising despite myself. "And somehow it's always me who has to fix it. But when I was drowning, when Eli was sick and I had to choose between medicine and rent, where were you then?" Dad finally spoke. "You always make everything about you, Marissa. Every conversation, every visit, you twist it around." That hit harder than I expected. I bit the inside of my cheek. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how a child's birthday had become about me, but instead I crouched down next to Eli. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, "why don't you go sit on the porch for a minute? I'll be right there." He nodded, eyes wary, and padded out the front door with his snack bag. Once he was out of earshot, I straightened up and faced them both again. "I didn't come here to beg," I said, "and I'm not here to fight. I just want you to hear this clearly, maybe for the first time ever. I'm not going to keep chasing scraps of your attention. I'm not going to keep proving myself to people who treat my pain like an inconvenience." Mom laughed, cold and short. "God, you're so dramatic." That word. Dramatic. The same one Dad used when I was 17 and called crying from the ER because my boyfriend shoved me and they didn't come. The same word Mom used when I said I was struggling after Eli's dad left and she offered a Target gift card and then ghosted me for a month. Dramatic. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just done pretending." Dad folded his arms tighter. What do you want from us then? An apology? Money? I shook my head. No, I want you to remember this moment the next time you ask where Eli is. I want you to remember that you made this choice, not me. And I'm not shielding him from this anymore. He deserves better. I walked to the door, opened it, and reached for Eli's hand. As we stepped outside, I heard Mom say, not to me but to herself, she always did think she was better than the rest of us. I didn't turn around, not this time. As I closed the door behind us, I felt Eli's fingers tighten around mine. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. We were halfway down the porch steps when I heard the door creak open behind me. I didn't turn around. I was done. But then a voice called out, not my mother's, not my father's. Marissa, I paused. Wait up. I turned slowly, squinting against the late morning sun. It was Danielle, my cousin, Aunt Linda's daughter, the one who used to braid my hair at family barbecues and who vanished from holiday dinners about 5 years ago without saying why. She stood there now, arms crossed, jacket half-zipped like she hadn't planned to stay long but couldn't walk away either. I overheard, she said. I blinked, still stunned. You were inside, she gave a tired half-shrug. I came to drop off a Tupperware dish Mom left here. Didn't know I'd walk into all that. I glanced toward the door, still ajar, but didn't move. Eli shifted his weight next to me, looking up at Danielle curiously. I just wanted to say, she added, stepping closer, you're not crazy. I didn't expect those words to hit as hard as they did. Danielle looked down at Eli and gave him a warm, gentle smile before kneeling beside him. You look just like your mama, she said sweetly. That's a good thing. Eli beamed, shy but pleased. I squeezed his hand. Danielle straightened up and met my eyes. They've done this for years, she said. Gaslighting, guilt-tripping, playing favorites. I left because of it and no one noticed. I thought you just got busy, I said quietly. She huffed a bitter laugh. That's what they told everyone. Danielle's too sensitive, Danielle's selfish. Danielle moved away for work. But really, I just got tired of always being the problem every time I stood up for myself. I felt something shift inside me, like a door unlocking. You don't owe them anything, she continued. Least of all your peace. I swallowed hard. It just hurts. I kept hoping maybe, just maybe, they'd see what it meant that I stayed, that I kept showing up, that I let Eli love them. Danielle nodded slowly. Yeah, that hope will bleed you dry if you let it. We stood there for a long moment, just breathing in the stillness. Then I said it not for her, but for myself. I'm done trying to make them love Eli. Danielle tilted her head, her expression soft but knowing. I glanced down at him, my son, my shadow, my heart, and continued. He deserves better. Someone who shows up, not just when it's convenient, not just for the photo ops. Danielle stepped closer and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. That's the bravest thing I've heard anyone in this family say in a long time. And just like that, I didn't feel so alone anymore. We walked to the car, Eli skipping ahead a little, holding the last of his juice. I opened the door and buckled him in, my motions slower now, more grounded. Danielle stood on the sidewalk, hands in her pockets. Before I got into the car, she called out again. Hey, Marissa. Yeah. If you ever want to talk, vent, scream into a void, call me. You're not the only one who walked away. You're just the only one brave enough to say it out loud. I smiled, a real one this time. Thanks, Danielle. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house, not even once. The next morning, I woke up without that knot in my stomach. No unread texts filled with guilt. No missed calls labeled Mom. No one knocking on my front door pretending it hadn't happened. Just silence. Still. Gentle. I made pancakes while Eli watched cartoons, the kind of peaceful breakfast I used to fantasize about back when I was still chasing approval. He asked for a smiley face pancake, and I actually made one that looked halfway human. He clapped like I was a magician. That simple joy, it was more than I'd felt in months. After we ate, I asked him, "Want to go to the park today?" His whole face lit up. With the ducks. With the ducks, I promised. We packed up peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices, and his little red water bottle with the dinosaur stickers that were peeling at the edges. I even remembered sunscreen for once. Progress. The sun was warm, but the breeze was cool, one of those perfect Denver days that makes you forget how long the winter felt. The city park was already alive when we got there. Joggers looping the trails, kids shrieking from the playground, elderly couples walking slowly, sharing quiet looks that said everything words didn't need to. I laced my fingers through Eli's as we walked toward the pond. His fingers were sticky from fruit snacks, but I didn't care. I held on tighter. We passed a man blowing bubbles for a pair of twins. Eli watched, mesmerized, as the bubbles floated and burst, chasing them until he almost fell over. I laughed, really laughed. The kind that starts in your belly and spills out without permission. It had been a while. We made our way to a bench shaded by a willow tree. I spread out the little blanket I kept in the trunk and sat with our lunch while Eli fed crumbs to a particularly aggressive duck with a limp. He named it Captain Quackers and told me it was the boss of all the other ducks. I watched him for a while, his little shoes caked with mud, cheeks red from running, his laugh echoing off the trees. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about my mother's silence, or my father's disdain, or Jordan's entitlement. I was just here with him. "You and me, buddy," I said quietly, more to myself than him. "That's the only team that matters now." Eli plopped next to me, unwrapping his sandwich. "We should get matching capes," he said seriously. I grinned. "Best idea I've heard all week." He nodded like he was filing that plan away for later. Then took a bite, swinging his legs over the edge of the bench, completely content. That's what got me. The way kids can adapt, how they bounce when grown-ups break. He hadn't asked where Grandma was. He hadn't asked why Uncle Jordan hadn't come to his party. He didn't need a long explanation. He just needed presence. Warmth. A place where he didn't have to earn love or beg for space. I wished I'd known that as a little girl. Back when I used to rearrange myself like furniture, hoping for approval. When I made straight A's not because I loved school, but because it was the only time Dad looked proud of me. When I'd scrub the kitchen for hours just to hear Mom say, "You're helpful." Even back then, I was always doing to be seen, never just being. I laid back on the grass and looked up at the trees. The wind moved gently through the branches. For once, the world wasn't demanding anything from me. Not a report. Not an explanation, not a defense, just this. Eli snuggled beside me, resting his head on my arm, crumbs still on his shirt, jelly on his cheek. I wiped it away with my thumb. We stayed like that for almost an hour, talking about duck politics, counting clouds, taking turns guessing what kind of dinosaurs we'd be if we lived in the dino days. At one point, I looked at my phone. No new messages, no apologies, no ambush explanations, no attempts to manipulate the narrative. Nothing. I thought I'd feel emptiness. Instead, I felt relief. Maybe that was the real turning point, not the fight, not the $3, not the walkout, but this. Sitting on a blanket in the park with my son, letting the rest of the world go. Not mourning what should have been, not rehearsing what I should have said, just being here, right here. I wasn't healed. Not yet. But I was no longer bleeding for people who didn't bring bandages. The next morning started quiet. Sunlight spilled in through the kitchen window, soft and gold. Eli was sitting cross-legged on the floor, arranging his plastic dinosaurs into a meeting, as he called it. I was sipping coffee and flipping through the grocery list, feeling finally like maybe life was turning a page. I remember thinking this is what peace feels like. Not loud, just steady. The knock on the door didn't match the mood. It was sharp, purposeful, 3 hard raps. I stood, startled. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not a delivery, not a neighbor. Eli didn't even look up. He was deep in negotiations between the Triceratops and the Stegosaurus. I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch. Both men, early 40s, one tall and pale, the other with dark skin and kind eyes that didn't meet mine. "Marissa James?" the taller one asked, voice clipped. "Yes," I answered, heart immediately thudding. "Is something wrong?" The one with kind eyes took a step forward. "We're here in response to a report filed with the Department of Children and Family Services." My stomach dropped. "What, a report?" The taller officer continued. "We have a court-approved order for temporary protective custody of your son, Eli James." My ears buzzed like a siren went off in my head. My body didn't move. "What?" I whispered. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the second officer said gently. "There's an open investigation. We are required by law to place Eli in temporary care while it proceeds." My eyes darted between them, my body frozen. This has to be a mistake. There's no investigation. I haven't done anything." The taller one pulled out paperwork. "You've been accused of emotional instability and creating an unsafe environment for your child. These are temporary steps." "By who?" I snapped, my voice rising without permission. Who would even? But I already knew. Of course I knew. "They did this," I whispered. My knees nearly buckled. Eli had stood by the door, confused. He was holding his T-Rex. "Mommy." I turned toward him immediately, crouching down to his level. My hands shook as I touched his shoulders. "Hey, baby," I whispered, forcing a smile. "It's okay, all right. Mommy's just gonna talk to the officers for a second. Are they here to see my dinosaurs? He asked innocently, and I couldn't answer. The officers stepped further onto the porch. No, no, please, I raised my hand to stop them. He's just a baby, he doesn't understand, please don't do this. Ma'am, we don't want to escalate this in front of the child, the tall one said, no emotion in his voice. Please cooperate. I am cooperating, I snapped. I just want to know what's happening, I don't even understand what this is. Eli was watching, frozen now. His eyes flicked between us. He looked scared. I leaned close to him again. You're going to go with these officers for just a little while, okay? But Mommy's going to fix this, I promise. His lip trembled. I don't want to go. I know, sweetie. I brushed his curls back from his forehead. I know, just be brave, all right? The officers moved forward. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw myself in front of them, but I knew that would only make things worse, so I stood, frozen, as they gently took his hand as he reached for me. Mommy, he cried. No. Mommy, don't let them. He kicked. He screamed. He dropped his dinosaur. I lunged toward him but stopped when the taller officer raised his hand. Please, he said sternly, don't interfere. I pressed my palm to my mouth. Tears streamed down my face. Eli, I cried, I love you, I love you. Mommy. His voice faded as they took him down the porch stairs into a waiting car I hadn't even noticed before. The door slammed shut. Silence. Just the soft clink of the T-Rex on the porch floor. I picked it up, holding it like it was the last piece of him. And I screamed. No one heard. No one came. I sank to the porch floor, still clutching his dinosaur, the cold wood pressing into my knees. They took my baby. They took my baby. And all I could think over and over, louder than the scream in my chest, was, they planned this. They set me up. They knew how to hurt me in the only place I was still vulnerable. Not my pride, not my dignity, but him. The room smelled like disinfectant and something worse, something stale and soulless. Like fear had soaked into the walls a long time ago and never quite left. They put me in a small room with gray walls, no windows, and a metal table bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner blinked slowly, watching everything. I sat there for over an hour before anyone came in. No one told me where Eli was. No one offered water. No one asked if I was okay, because none of this was about me being okay. When the door finally opened, a man in a crisp dark blazer walked in holding a tablet. His steps were measured, deliberate. He had that look some officers were, not angry, not aggressive, just certain that whatever you say will somehow confirm their suspicion. Marissa James, he asked, pulling out the chair across from me. Yes, I said hoarsely. My voice barely sounded like mine. I'm Detective Granger, he said. I'll be conducting the preliminary review of your case. My case. The word tasted wrong. This is all a mistake. I've never hurt my child. Never. You have to tell me where he is. He's scared. He's never even spent a night away from me. Granger's face didn't change. He's with temporary care, that's all I can tell you for now. Temporary care, I repeated. Like foster care. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his tablet and tapped it a few times. Then he turned the screen toward me. I want to show you something. I leaned forward, breath caught in my throat. It was a video. Footage from a phone, shaky, zoomed in, probably recorded from someone standing just out of view. I immediately recognized it, the fight on my parents' porch, the confrontation, the moment I raised my voice. The second I told them I'm done trying to make them love Eli. It played on loop, me gesturing sharply, my tone sharp, intense. No context, no background, just a woman appearing to lose control. Granger paused it. This is from a neighbor across the street, he said. They submitted it along with a written statement that your child looked frightened and that you were exhibiting unstable behavior in front of him. He wasn't frightened of me, I snapped. He was frightened because he was watching his mother get ganged up on by two people who've never treated her with basic decency. Granger's eyebrows rose slightly. Would you say your relationship with your parents is strained? I laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. He leaned back, arms crossed. We have to take emotional environment seriously, Ms. James, especially when it involves minors. I leaned forward, eyes burning. That was a family fight, not a crime. I defended my son. I stood up to people who have treated me like garbage for years, and now you're calling that unstable. We're not calling it anything yet, he said, voice steady. We're reviewing all evidence, but the report also includes a claim that you have previously screamed at your child in public. That's not true. I nearly shouted. I mean, I've raised my voice, sure, like any parent trying to stop a 4-year-old from eating gum off a bus seat, but scream at him, abuse him. My voice cracked. I would never hurt Eli, never. Granger didn't reply right away. He studied me. I wiped my face with my sleeve, realizing only then how hard I'd been crying. "I'm all he has," I whispered. "He doesn't even have a dad, it's just me." Granger finally looked away, tapping the screen again. "Look," I said, softer now. "You don't have to believe me right this second, but talk to my neighbors. Check his school, talk to his teachers. Eli's happy, he's thriving, he's loved, and he knows it." Granger paused, then nodded slightly. "That will be part of the process." He stood up. "That's it?" I asked, rising too fast. "You're just leaving." "For now," he said. "You'll be contacted when there's an update. In the meantime, I recommend you remain cooperative and avoid discussing the case with anyone involved." The door closed behind him with a sharp, final click. I sat back down slowly, my whole body shaking. My breath came in ragged pulls. They didn't believe me. They took my child. And all I had to offer in my defense was the truth, a truth no one wanted to hear yet. I was a mother accused of being dangerous for trying to protect her son. And the part that hurt most, somewhere out there, Eli was crying, and I couldn't get to him. The house was too quiet when I came home. Not the comforting kind of quiet, the one you earn after a long day, but that hollow, echoing silence that fills the air after something has been ripped away. Eli's shoes were still by the door, his little blue sneakers with the dinosaur print. His cup of half-finished juice was still on the table, a straw bent at an angle. It felt wrong to touch anything, like moving it would erase him further. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just staring. Then I whispered to no one. "They set me up." Saying it out loud didn't make it easier. It just made it real. I sank onto the couch and buried my face in my hands. For a few moments there was nothing but the sound of my own breathing, shaky, uneven, desperate. Then the tears came, the kind that don't ask permission. The kind that feel like your body is trying to push out everything that hurts through your eyes. But even as I cried, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Who called them? Who sent that video? Who said I was unstable? Every thought circled back to the same answer. My parents. Who else had motive? Who else had the access, the nerve, the cruelty? I pictured my father's crossed arms, my mother's smug, practiced pity. Her whispering tone, "She's always so emotional." They'd planted the seed years ago, this idea that I was too much, too dramatic, too unstable. All they needed was one audience willing to listen. One system that believed unhinged mother over betrayed daughter. And they found it. The walls felt smaller by the second. I stood up abruptly, pacing the living room. My eyes landed on Eli's toys scattered on the rug. His art projects taped crookedly on the fridge. A drawing of the two of us under a big sun with the words "me and mommy" written in lopsided marker letters. I walked over and touched it, tracing the stick figures with my finger. "I'll bring you home," I whispered. "I swear to you, baby, I'll bring you home." For the first time since the officers had driven away, I felt something other than grief. It started low, almost invisible. A quiet hum of fury rising up from somewhere ancient and maternal. I wasn't going to let them win. They wanted me to crumble, to scream and confirm their lies, to beg them to fix what they broke. Not this time. This time I would fight differently. No chaos, no outbursts, just precision. I turned off the lights, leaving the house dim except for the glow of a single lamp by the couch. The silence no longer frightened me, it steadied me. On the coffee table, Eli's favorite dinosaur, T-Rex, lay on its side. I picked it up and held it against my chest. The same toy he dropped when the officers led him away. "Mommy's going to fix this," I murmured. "And when I do, no one will ever take you from me again." I sat back down and pulled out my notebook, the one I used for budgeting and daycare notes. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, in small, angry letters, "Step 1, find the truth." I listed everyone who might know something: Danielle, the neighbor who recorded the video, anyone connected to the complaint. I didn't know what I was building yet, but it was better than sitting still. When my phone buzzed, I jumped. It was an unknown number. For a second, I hoped it was about Eli. But when I answered, it was a robotic voice confirming the temporary custody arrangement under review. No warmth, no answers, just legal distance. I hung up, staring at the phone like it was something poisonous. Then I laughed, a small, broken sound that surprised even me. "They really think I'll just disappear," I said aloud. "They think I'll break." I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling, tears drying on my cheeks. "They want to break me," I whispered, voice trembling. "But I will make them regret this." The words hung in the air, sharp and steady. For the first time in days, I felt my spine straighten. Somewhere deep down, beneath the ache and the fear, a spark had caught. And even though I didn't know how yet, how to prove the truth, how to undo the damage, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The knock came just after sunset. This time it wasn't sharp or aggressive. It was measured, almost polite. I opened the door to find Detective Granger standing on my porch again. No backup, no clipboard, just him. He nodded once. "Ms. James, may I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. "You're not here to take anything this time, are you?" "No," he said, clearing his throat. "Just here for a follow-up." He stepped inside slowly, his eyes moving across the living room. The quiet hum of the fridge buzzed in the background. I watched him carefully as he scanned the space. Tidy couch. Eli's alphabet chart still taped to the wall. The homework board I'd made last fall, still set for phonics and counting. His little desk in the corner with crayons organized by color. It looked like what it was, a home. He paused near the kitchen, glancing at a chore chart held up by magnets. "Eli earned stickers for brushing his teeth and making his bed," I said, trying not to sound defensive. "We were working on helping without being asked before." My voice trailed off. Granger said nothing for a beat, then opened his small notebook. "I spoke to your neighbors," he said finally. "2 of them." "And?" I asked, unable to stop the edge in my voice. He flipped a page. "They said your boy's well cared for, that they hear laughter from your apartment almost every evening. One of them mentioned seeing you read to him under the porch light on warm nights." I stared at him, my heart thudding harder with every word. "That doesn't exactly align with the version of you in the report," he added, eyes now locked on mine. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He closed the notebook. "Look, I can't make promises, Ms. James, but I do document the truth as I see it." Something cracked in my chest at that, not from hurt, but from relief. "Why are you really here?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Part of it's the job, the other part, I've seen plenty of unstable households. Yours doesn't feel like one." We stood there in silence. His words weren't a pardon, but they were something I hadn't felt in days, seen. I walked over to Eli's drawing on the fridge, the one I'd almost taken down a dozen times out of pain. "You see this?" I asked, pointing at the crude little sun and 2 stick figures. Granger stepped closer. "He drew that the day after his birthday, the day they all forgot, and he still put them in it." My throat tightened. Still wanted them to be part of his world. I looked at Granger. I stopped trying to earn their love that day, but Eli, he still believed they'd show up. He nodded once, slowly. "Kids tend to do that, believe harder than we do." I crossed my arms. "So what now?" "I'll file the inspection," he said, "and include my notes from the neighborhood interviews. After that, it's up to the court." "Will they let him come home?" I asked, voice cracking despite myself. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but it's possible." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," he said, glancing back, "I've worked enough of these cases to know when someone's faking it." "And?" I asked. He met my gaze. "You're not faking anything." And then he left. The door clicked shut behind him, and I sank slowly into the armchair. Not victory, not justice, but maybe. And for the first time since Eli was taken, maybe was enough to hold on to. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not just the air, the atmosphere. The kind of cold that creeps into your spine and makes you feel like no matter how much truth you carry, you're still just another name on a docket. I sat at the table alone. No lawyer. Couldn't afford one. Just a court-appointed social worker seated quietly 2 chairs down, avoiding my eyes. Across the aisle sat my parents. My father wore the same expression he always did at my school events, like he was tolerating a play he didn't want to see. My mother had on her concerned face, hands folded neatly, mouth pressed just enough to look solemn. Not guilty, not smug, just presentable. The judge entered, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a measured tone. She called the case, and just like that, my life became a file in her hands. Detective Granger took the stand first. He looked every bit the professional, crisp blazer, firm voice. No drama, just facts. He walked through his evaluation, explained the initial complaint, the video, the report submitted by the neighbor. Then he paused deliberately before continuing. "I conducted a follow-up home inspection," he said. "Spoke to 2 separate neighbors, both of whom described the home as calm, structured, and safe. One neighbor stated the child often plays outside under direct supervision and appears emotionally stable and joyful." The judge nodded. "And your assessment?" Granger met her eyes. "In my professional opinion, the initial report lacks the full context necessary to justify continued separation. The home appears safe and nurturing." A silence settled in the room. My parents didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then the judge cleared her throat. Based on the officer's report and supporting evidence, this court finds no grounds for continued custody separation. My hands flew to my mouth. She kept reading, something about temporary oversight, possible check-ins, but I barely heard. Then came the words I'd waited for. Custody is restored to the biological mother, effective immediately. Tears flooded my eyes as I choked on a sob, when I didn't even know was still inside me. The bailiff said something. I nodded, dazed. Somewhere behind me, a door opened. And then, "Mommy!" Eli's voice cut through the noise like a beam of light. I turned just as he ran toward me, arms wide, feet pounding across the marble floor. I caught him midair, falling to my knees as I clutched him to my chest. "I missed you," he cried, wrapping his arms around my neck. I couldn't speak. I just held him tighter than I ever had. My whole body shook. "I got scared," he whispered, "but I was brave." I pulled back to look in his eyes. "You were so brave, baby, so brave." Behind me, Granger approached slowly, pausing at the edge of our circle. I looked up at him, tears still falling. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me when no one else would." He shifted awkwardly. "I was just doing my job." "No," I said, standing now, still holding Eli's hand. "You were doing more than your job." The judge cleared her throat again, now addressing my parents. "Before we adjourn," she said, "I want to note that a formal defamation inquiry has been approved. Based on the digital trail attached to the complaint, text records, IP logs, and the source of the footage, there is significant evidence suggesting malicious intent." My mother paled. My father's jaw clenched. But they said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at them. I just held Eli tighter. The judge banged her gavel. "Next case." And just like that, it was done. Not all of it. Not the damage, not the scars, but my son was back in my arms, and that was everything. The courthouse steps were crowded, but the space around us felt strangely still. I held Eli's hand tightly as we walked through the glass doors, out into the crisp October air. The sun was shining, but it wasn't warm. It was that kind of light that reveals everything: shadows, cracks, lies. My parents stood near the bottom of the stairs. They hadn't left yet. Of course not. They stood like they were waiting for something, someone to shift the narrative. My mother clutched her handbag like it could shield her from judgment. My father looked like a man who still believed he had control. Granger exited behind us, paperwork in hand, expression unreadable. The moment my parents saw him, they moved in. My father stepped forward first, jaw tight. "You think this is over?" he hissed under his breath. "You've made a very powerful mistake. We record everything, officer. Don't think for a second we won't be watching you." Granger didn't flinch. He simply turned to them with a calm that cut deeper than rage. "You've already written your sentence," he said, voice low and precise. "I'm just the one reading it aloud." He didn't wait for a response. He walked past them, down the steps, and kept moving. I stood silently at the top with Eli, watching the whole exchange. My mother finally looked up at me. Her face, usually composed, sculpted, was cracked now, not with remorse, but with exposure. I met her gaze without blinking, and I saw it. For the first time in my life, she looked afraid of me, not because I threatened her, not because I had power she understood, but because I had something she didn't anymore: the truth. And proof. A woman in a black blazer approached us. She introduced herself quietly, court-appointed enforcement. She handed each of my parents a slip of paper: restraining orders, filed, approved, enforced immediately. Neither of them spoke. My father crumpled his and muttered something under his breath, but he didn't look back. They walked away, together, and I let them go. Because for once, I wasn't walking after them, begging to be believed. I wasn't asking for love that came with conditions or apologies soaked in gaslight. I had Eli's hand in mine, warm and trusting. That was all I needed. We stood there for a moment longer. Eli tilted his head. "Can we go get ice cream now?" I laughed through the knot still lodged in my throat. "Yeah," I said, "we can." As we turned away from the courthouse, I glanced over my shoulder once, just once, not to see if they were still there, but to remind myself that I was walking forward now, not back. Later that week, the courthouse felt completely different. Not because the floors had changed or the lighting softened, but because this time I wasn't here to defend myself. I was just here, free. Eli was back home, asleep in his bed last night for the first time in what felt like years instead of days. He'd fallen asleep holding my hand, as if even in his dreams he needed to know I was still there. I didn't move all night. Didn't need to. The next morning, I dropped him off at daycare and returned to the courthouse, not because I had to, but because someone had asked. Granger was waiting near the bottom of the front steps. He looked different out of uniform. No badge clipped to his belt, no file folder in his hand, just jeans, a jacket, and the kind of look people have when they're still figuring out how to say something. "Hey," he said when I reached him. "Hey," I replied. We stood there for a moment, the wind tugging at my sleeves. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted. "I wasn't sure I would either." He smiled, just a flicker. "I know this isn't how most people meet. Being accused of emotional instability by your own family while a stranger decides the fate of your child. Yeah, it's not in most romantic comedies." He laughed, a real one, and I realized it was the first time I'd seen him look anything other than professional. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Listen, I know I'm not exactly smooth with this stuff, but I thought maybe, if you felt up to it, we could talk. Not as detective and mother, just as two people who have been through a very weird storm." I tilted my head. "You want coffee? Unless you're more of a tea with a splash of trust issues person." I laughed. "Depends on the day." We started walking. Nothing was official, no pressure, just a sidewalk and shared silence. And then he looked over at me and said something soft, something careful. "This wasn't how I imagined us meeting. But maybe we could try again, less courtroom, more coffee." I stopped. He did too. There was something in his eyes, curiosity, respect, maybe even hope. I thought about Eli's giggle the night before, about how Granger had spoken for me in court when no one else would, about how I wasn't broken anymore, I was whole and healing, and still capable of yes. I smiled. "After what you did for Eli," I said, "I'd be honored." He held out his arm, more playful than formal. "Shall we?" We walked down the courthouse stairs together. The same ones I had walked up shaking and scared only days before. But this time the air was lighter, like the worst had passed. And something new, something unexpected, was waiting on the other side. 1 year later, and the sun felt kinder. Maybe it was just the season. Or maybe it was the way peace settles into your bones when you finally stop waiting for the next blow to come. Eli squealed from the swings as I gave him a push. "Higher," he shouted, laughing with that pure, wild joy that only kids know how to have. "Not too high, mister," I called after him, though my smile said otherwise. Beside me, Granger Ben now returned with 2 ice cream cones, the paper napkins already spotted with drips. "He wanted extra sprinkles," he said, handing over the vanilla mound with rainbow dots. "Of course he did," I said, taking the cone. "You spoil him." "I'm trying to win favorite grown-up status," he shrugged. "You're in the top 3. He grinned. We sat on the park bench, watching Eli pump his little legs harder and harder, pretending to fly. The wind tugged gently at the trees, leaves dancing in the late summer breeze. It was one of those rare Saturdays where no one was rushing. No phones, no pressure, just presence. It had taken months to get here. Court appearances, counseling sessions, new routines. Eli had his nightmares for a while. Sometimes he'd wake up crying for me just to make sure I was still here. But eventually the fear softened. The wounds began to close. He laughs more now. I do too. Some scars remain, yes, but not every scar means pain. Some mean survival. I glanced at Ben, who was now quietly helping a toddler nearby pick up a dropped toy. That quiet steadiness, the same one I used to interpret as cold, had become something I trusted. He never rushed me, never pushed. He just stayed. And somewhere along the line, that became love. It's funny. The people I used to think were unshakable ended up being the ones who cracked when truth came knocking. And the ones I never expected, like the officer who showed up on my doorstep, turned out to be the ones who stood by me when it mattered. My eyes scanned the park. So many families, so many different kinds of love. It hit me like it always does around this time of year. The realization that it's not blood that makes a family. It's loyalty. It's showing up. It's choosing someone over and over again, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something. Eli hopped off the swing and ran toward us, hair tousled, cheeks flushed. "Mommy, look," he held up a dandelion. "It's magic." Ben leaned toward him. "You gotta make a wish." Eli closed his eyes, gripped the stem, and blew the seeds into the wind. "What you wish for?" I asked gently. He grinned, eyes gleaming. "I already got it." My throat tightened. I reached for his hand with one of mine, took Ben's with the other. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was clinging to something fragile. I was holding something solid, something real. Justice gave me back my son, but love gave me something even rarer, peace.